Today, I'm going to share with you a very, very important question. The question I get quite often, and that is this: should I prospect small or large companies as a freight broker startup? Should you be going after large companies or smaller companies? What's the right answer? Here's the reality. There is no right answer, but I'm going to share with you some of my personal experience, and I'm going to share with you some of the experience of the students that I've taught over the years that have built 6 and 7 and 8-figure freight brokerages. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. But before we get into that, stick around because I'm going to share with you a 3-step process, a very simple 3-step process on how, after you've identified your niche and you want to make a list of these small to medium-sized companies, how you can build that list and then start doing outreach and start connecting with those prospects. But before we get into that, I'm going to tell you a quick story. The story is about the first shipper I ever got as a freight broker back in 2003, 2004 when I launched my business. I remember it was a local niche furniture manufacturer in the Buffalo, New York area that made kind of high-end office furniture. And at the time, I think they were probably doing maybe around $5 or $10 million a year in sales. They were a relatively small company. We moved a load from Buffalo down to New York City. And I remember the anxiety and I remember the entire sales process. I remember everything about it. You know, we made 100, 150 bucks on the load, but that really wasn't the point. It wasn't really about the money. What it was about was the lessons that I was able to learn, right? The lessons that I was able to learn about that sales process, the lesson I was able to learn about moving that first load. And eventually, I mean, we went on to do business not only with small companies, but medium-sized companies and even large companies. Some of the largest companies in the world like US Steel and Unilever and Nestle and John Deere and some really large brands. So we did business with a whole bunch of companies in a variety of different sizes and industries over the course of that company before I sold it. And even today, that company continues on and is one of the top 100 freight brokers in the country. But here's the thing. Here's what I want you to understand. As a freight broker startup, I'm going to give you some of my experience. I'm going to give you a little bit of feedback and a little bit of a framework that you can follow in order to get started. All right. Because most of you here are either looking to become a freight broker, freight agent, or you're new to the freight broker, freight agent game. And this applies to both brokers and agents. So here's what you're going to do. My suggestion and what I have seen proven work the most often is focusing in on small to medium-sized companies. Now, let me try to define that for you. Now, in the manufacturing space, if you are looking at small to medium-sized companies, small companies are typically companies that are doing anywhere from 0 up to, let's say, $50 million a year in revenue. That's a small company. I know that seems like a lot, but that's considered a small company. And then medium-sized companies are typically companies that are doing anywhere from 50 million up to maybe $1 billion in sales. And again, that seems very large. And then large companies are doing $1 billion plus. That gives you a little bit of a framework of how most people think about small, medium, large, and that should give you a little bit of an idea of what I'm talking about today. So my suggestion to you is to start with small to medium-sized companies and work your way up. And when I say small, you can't be too small. I mean, you can't have a manufacturer that's doing 100,000 or even 200,000 or 500,000 or even $1 million in sales. That's a very small company. So what I suggest is focusing in on smaller companies that are doing maybe somewhere in the $5 to $10 million range as a minimum, all the way up to, which is about $50 million in sales. Now, you can also go after medium-sized companies, companies that are doing maybe somewhere in the range of 50 million, but I wouldn't go all the way up to $1 billion. I would probably try to focus in on something less than $500 million in sales. So if you look at those groups combined, it would be someone that's doing about $5 to $10 million of sales and is all the way up to maybe $500 million, $500 million in sales. So that would be the revenue basis. Now, if you can't target it by revenue, a lot of times that's difficult. You can target it by employee size, the number of employees. So when you look at manufacturing, most manufacturers in the US average out to do about $200,000 in revenue per employee. Okay. So I'm not very good at math. But if you looked at a company that was doing $10 million a year in sales and you divide that by 200,000, that's 50 employees. Okay. So if you had a company that had 50 employees, and let's say the upper end of that range is 500 million divided by 200,000, that's up to 2,500 employees. Okay. So you'd be looking for companies that were between 50 employees as high as maybe up to 2,500 employees. That would be your small to medium-sized companies. Now, I would start on the smaller end. The reason why I like to start on the smaller end and work your way up is, number one, smaller companies are easier to navigate the sales process. All right. There's less complexity to the sales process and onboarding process as a new vendor. They're more approachable, right? There's less competition because everybody goes after the big companies, right? And it allows you to practice. It allows you to practice without burning huge opportunities, right? Because again, you only get one chance to make a good first impression, and you'd rather blow it with a company that's doing $5 million in sales than a company that's doing $1 billion or $1.5 billion in sales, right? So those are some of the reasons why I like to start on the smaller side. The other big reason is that, number one, there's way more small companies than there are large companies. I know you may find that hard to believe because you only hear about the big ones, but there are exponentially more small companies that are doing 10 million to $500 million than there are companies that are doing $500 million and up, right? Yeah, so number one, there's a lot more targets. Number two, there's a lot more need. Small companies need freight brokers and freight agents more than larger companies. Now, why is that? Well, larger companies have more resources. Larger companies like to bring a lot of talent inside and control it. Smaller companies are going through a growth curve and they want to ramp up, and they have a harder time attracting top talent, and they have a harder time scaling. So they like to outsource in order to scale. So that's where being a freight broker, freight agent, stepping in and working with these small to medium-sized companies can have a huge, huge advantage. Okay, so those are some of the reasons why. So now, listen, stick around because I'm going to share with you a 3-step process, a very simple 3-step process on how, after you've identified your niche and you want to make a list of these small to medium-sized companies, how you can build that list and then start doing outreach and start connecting with those prospects. Okay, so step number 1, very simple. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to check out apollo.io. You can sign up for a free account at freightbrokerbootcamp.com/free leads. Let me pull it up on the screen. You sign up, all you need is an email. You don't need a credit card. You can sign up and you can get access to the Apollo database. You can then start searching that database by industry and the number of employees and the geography and all the different variables, okay? It's one of the best tools out there that I've seen for freight brokers to generate a list of their target niche, okay? So that's step number 1. You go to apollo.io. You sign up for a free account through my link, freightbrokerbootcamp.com/free leads. That is a partnership link. And so I want to be fully transparent about that. It doesn't cost you anything more. And if you sign up through that link, you do not need a credit card. Okay. Step number 2, once you've compiled that list, what you're going to do with each one of those companies prior to reaching out to them, you're going to go and do a little bit of research. You're going to go to their company website. You're going to go to Google. You're going to go to LinkedIn, and you're going to gather some sales intelligence. You're going to gather a little bit of data, a little bit of information that you can then use as a way to educate yourself and to reach out to that prospect and find a way to be different, okay? Because that's really important. And then the last part is you're going to start reaching out to them through email, through phone, through LinkedIn, through face-to-face, whatever medium that you choose. I would recommend using a variety of all of those different strategies. And you're going to start reaching out and having conversations with those prospects, okay? The key here is you want to find a way to be different. And that's what people struggle with. You don't want to sound like every other freight broker out there. So for those of you that are struggling with that and you need help and you need a mentor and you need a coach and you're looking for somebody that can help you with that, okay, and help you go get through the navigate that process, you need to check out my Freight Broker Sales Accelerator. That's the link where you can get on the wait list. That's where I take this piece of my brain, I transplant everything into your head, my favorite sales strategies, tactics, tools, but most importantly, my entire Freight Broker sales system that allowed me to do over $200 million as a broker. And more importantly, has allowed many of my students to go out and build 6 and 7 and even 8-figure freight brokerages on their own using the strategies and frameworks that I share in that program. Now, that is a coaching program. Again, it's not just an online course, it's an actual coaching program. So it's typically sold out, but occasionally spots will open up. If you get on the wait list, you'll be the first to be notified when new spots open up. And at that point, you'll be considered and possibly will invite you into the program. So again, you can get on the wait list at freightbrokerbootcamp.com/ wait list. All right, so listen, if you guys are just in the startup phase and you're curious about becoming a freight broker or a freight agent, and you need somebody to kind of connect the dots A to Z, you're a little bit confused, maybe you got some conflicting information on YouTube and you got some conflicting information on TikTok and you're not sure who to believe. Again, I've done over $200 million as a freight broker, trained over 10,000 students in 16 different countries, and we offer a 60-day, 100% unconditional money back guarantee. So if you're curious about that, you can check that out at freightbrokerbootcamp.com. Thank you so much for being here. Make sure you hit the like button, comment below with any questions you have, and I'll see you next week on the next Freight Broker Bootcamp Live.